topic. So when we meet, so next week, as I said, we may have a challenge because I'll be invigilating exams for e-campus. So those days, so we need to make arrangement with the class, particularly the weekend that will come, not next, the other weekend, preferably in the evenings when you're free, or early morning. So compensation, just as I was saying, like recruitment, so many of you are familiar. Most of you know what compensation is. That's why you're going for work. That's why you're working. Ultimately, you want to be rewarded. So compensation has a number of roles which it plays when it comes to human resource. But what is key is for you to understand that compensation encompasses more than just a salary. It has benefits, incentives, and so on and so forth. So in terms of its role, it is a motivating force. It is a strategic tool that we use. When we say strategic tool, it means we can use compensation to achieve strategic objectives of the organization. It is a tool that we use for talent acquisition. That's what we use compensation for. Now we'll look at the total compensation, what we call total compensation. So total compensation and its components. First and foremost, an organization should have a pay policy. For those who are in the public sector, in the state-owned institutions, enterprises, institutions that are statutory bodies or quasi-institutions, you know that the Emolument Commission is now emphasizing that you should have a pay policy. So just like I've been talking about that HR function, you need to have a policy so that you guide your decisions. You don't have individuals who just wake up. So when it comes to compensation, you should also need a policy or guiding principles, regulation. So this is really a topical issue when you look at what the Emolument Commission is pushing. They are pushing for harmonization, equal pay for equal work of equal value. That's the objective which they are trying to achieve. So even in the private sector, it is important that you have a compensation policy so that you guide decisions that relate to compensation. So when you're talking about the total compensation, one of the things, of course, you need to look at both the private and also the public institution. It is what the law provides for. So the law will provide for minimum standards. So even as you are crafting your conditions of service, as you are crafting your compensation policy, ensure that the provisions are in line with what is provided for in the law. And that's why when you are unionized employee, your union and mandate, before they implement conditions of service, they need to submit them to the Ministry of Labor for attestation. In other words, they need to approve whether what you have provided for in the collective agreement, they're in line with the minimum standards provided for. And also, if it is just a contract, even when you employ your domestic workers, when you employ people at your small company, you still need to submit those contracts. That's the procedure. Submit those contracts to the Ministry of Labor so that they check whether they are in line with what is provided for the law. So that's the starting point, that whatever conditions of service that you put in the contract, in the collective agreement, those should be in line with the law. Of course, others, the law has no issue if conditions are more favorable to the employee. So when we're talking about the total compensation, we are talking about the base salary, or commonly known as the basic salary. So I want to believe all of you know what your basic salary is. It is basically the amount that you receive every month without allowances. That's your base salary. So you check when you're being appointed, it's clearly stated your annual salary, it is this. Your monthly salary, this is the monthly salary, and this will be your entry point. So it will be clearly stated if it is 150,000 per annum, 150,000, 156,000, 160,000, 170,000, and your entry point, this is the amount. It will clearly state, and then it will also clearly state the other benefits, housing allowance. In 2012, if I'm not mistaken, 2012, 2013, they tried to clean up the payroll for the public servants, that they wanted only 3 things as a minimum to appear, because they used to have so many items on the payslip. I remember at one point, the lawyers who were working at the Ministry of, is it Ministry of Justice? Yeah, I think the then minister was the Honorable Kavimba. They were fired because they resisted harmonization and consolidation of salaries. So I think the argument was the government, they combined, they harmonized and consolidated most of their allowances. So they had the basic salary very low, and then also they had the retention. I think it was retention allowance of 100% of the basic salary. So you can imagine if your salary is 10,000, then you've got 10,000 retention allowance and the other allowances, but they consolidated them because the idea was for the employees generally, for those who are not in a management position, who are entitled to other fringe benefits, only 3 things needed to appear on the payslip: the salary, basic salary, housing allowance, and transport allowance. So they consolidated all those allowances into the basic salary. Of course, it was beneficial for the employee, because when you're retiring or you're on a fixed term contract, when they're computing your gratuity or your retirement benefits, they use the salary, not your allowances. Most institutions, of course, they'll use the exit salary. So if as you're exiting, if it's 10,000, they'll use that one, regardless of how the basic salary has been changing over time. So the basic salary, that's part of the total compensation. There are benefits. I'm sure some of you have health care in addition to the statutory one. Now we have NEMA, which is statutory. Whether it's adequate or not, that's another debate, but at least we have the statutory one. But institutions are free, and I'm sure you have seen that even with NEMA, your organizations have continued also to provide an additional one. Probably you've got a health scheme. Maybe some of you, it may even have an evacuation out of this country. So health scheme, others is within local here. You can go to private hospitals. You can go to high cost UTH, minor SOCO. You have retirement. So retirement in the case of Zambia, the pension. We have also the statutory one, which is the NAPSA. Of course, NAPSA has undergone reforms. We didn't have initially the provision for partial withdrawal. Now they've even made further amendments. So of course, people will still be entitled to partial withdrawal, but also according to the new amendment, you'll still be entitled to a lump sum 3 months before, of course, you retire. So those are the amendments. Also, the NAPSA Act provides for the 3 types of retirement. So that's the basic. But also, organizations are free to have the occupational pension. So some of you may have the in-house, what you call in-house, with the fund managers, maybe with ZISC, with the Satunya, and so on and so forth. And most of those are contributed. All those are part of the benefits. Some of you still have education allowance or benefits. Children, they pay for maybe 4 kids, one at kindergarten, one at primary, secondary, and tertiary. They'll pay for those. Others will just pay lump sum, 100,000 per term. That's what they'll pay, and so on and so forth. So all those are benefits, and those are the ones which attract employees. They're the same condition that will retain employees. Others, of course, you may have incentives and bonuses, what we call variable pay, tied to individual, team, or the organization. You may have competence-based pay. So if you are at some point, we had a challenge with the ZRA taxing the mining sector. We didn't have experts. And I think we could have been hearing calls that we are taxing the mining sector. And at one point, we had to hire consultants, ZRA had to hire consultants on how to tax the mining sector. So you can actually recruit an expert just on taxation, an accountant who is specialized in mining taxation, and probably you may have a specific incentive, competence-based pay. You may also have performance-based pay. So if your organization is unionized, like our institution, sorry, I've got a code, like our institution, where you have 3 unions, they may negotiate maybe 10% salary increment across the board. But then you may also have performance-based pay. You may want to encourage a performance culture. So for example, in your performance management system, of course, which we'll look at, you may define the parameters, the milestone in terms of those who may be entitled to performance-based pay. For example, you may set that the minimum standard in terms of performance should be 50%. If you score 50%, of course, you may still be recommended for development, for performance improvement, but at least that would be the minimum. Those would score maybe 75%, between 75 to 85%, they may receive an additional 5% up and above what the union would have negotiated for. Then those who score above in the performance appraisal, 86 to 90% may have an addition of 7.5 up and above what the union would have negotiated for. Then those who score between 90 and 100 may have 10% up and above. So if a salary increment is 10%, you may have an addition of, if you're getting 10,000, an addition of 1,000. But up and above, if your score is between 90 and 100, again, you may have 10%. So you have an addition of, again, a 1,000. So instead of salary increment for that particular year being 1,000, maybe 2,000. So the idea is to promote a performance culture. Some organizations, of course, they offer equity. Employees can be given shares if you perform well. If I'm not mistaken, at one point, Copperbelt Energy Corporation, I think they had offered some shares to their employees. Basically, you want to ensure that there's a sense of ownership, among employees. So the way you treat, if you've got your own company, you'll be serious. You work very hard and so on and so forth, because you feel this is your investment. So even employees, as part of motivation, you can allow them to own shares, and that could be based on maybe performance. Oh, so basically, this list is not exhaustive. If you look at the benefits, others may have holiday allowance every year. So if you check most of the CEOs, when you do the salary surveys, you discover that some CEOs, under the benefits and perks, they will have holiday allowances. They can go to destination of their choice in the world every year. They can go to the US, they can go to Cuba, they can go to Mauritius. Yeah, you can also go to Siavong, or you can go to Kafue Gorge, um, if it's a local one, if it's provided for. Yes, Clement?
Yes, I wanted to find out on is it performance-based pay, the one you are talking about, where someone performs well?
Yes, please.
Um, does it continue like that even if they underperform in the subsequent year, or it has to be reduced when they underperform at the following year or the years that come?
Yes. So you, when you have a salary increment, it depends how you want to define it. Remember, the policy should guide. So if you say you have a salary increment and that salary increment probably it doesn't maybe you, according to Leo, you could have defined it. It is not a one-off. It may otherwise it may qualify to be a bonus. Bonuses usually they are one-off. But once you've increased the salary, if you perform very well, you have a salary increment of 10%. That 10% may translate to, as I said, to 1,000. So you add it to 1,000. And the organization also, if it's unionized, there's a salary increment of 10%. So the total it will be 2,000. So you add the 2,000 to the 10,000. That will be 12,000. So if it is not a one-off, it means that becomes now your salary. So the following year, if you don't perform well, you may not just have another salary increment. You will still be getting, you may just now rely on the one which will be negotiated for by the union. Uh, Unless it is explicitly stated in the policy that this is a one-off, then of course it may not be there the following year. So it means you still go back to 11,000 if you don't perform. However, best practice is that it stays just like any other salary increment. So if it drops off, the organization will clearly state in the policy. Okay, so I was saying that in addition to the those benefits, there could be several others. Of course, just to encourage employees to work hard and so on and so forth. Yeah, so as I said, compensation, of course, aims at aligning with organizational goals. So one of the things you can do is to incentivize, for example, those departments that are revenue generating. And how do you do it? You incentivize sales teams with performance-based bonuses tied to revenue targets. So like ZRI, they normally give them those bonuses. If you collect so much, you have this. If you've got sales department, you give them target. If we hit these numbers, these targets, you get you get bonuses because you want to ensure that organization they meet the objective and they remain a going concern. So if you have to remain a going concern, then you need to be hitting your revenue targets. Otherwise, that threatens your existence as an organization. Also, you may reward employees who develop new products or processes with equity grants or innovation bonuses. For the service sector, I think it is important to implement customer service awards or bonuses for employees who consistently exceed customer expectations. That is critical for the service sector because your continuity in business may also largely be dependent on customer service that you offer to your clients. Then also compensation has an impact when it comes to motivation. So fair compensation, of course, increases motivation, and these may include achievement. So if you are an employee in your organizational behavior, I'm sure you could have tackled this. If you look at the various motivation theories, but even in this course, I've seen there's a topic on motivation, and if I'm not mistaken, it's one of your assignment questions. So the various motivation theories by Hesbeck, the motivation hygiene factors, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, self-actualization, and so on and so forth. So recognition, job satisfaction, personal growth or self-actualization, status, and so all those are part and parcel of motivation. So from the organization point of view, you need to design motivation or retention strategies and motivation strategies that may address the needs of the diverse needs of the employees, because not everyone is motivated. Other people are motivated by the high need of achievement. So we've got the high need of achievement. There are others who get motivated when they achieve. Just like students, others, they get motivated when they score very high, they get very good grades, they get motivated and they work very hard. So similarly, in an organization, when employees accomplish what they have been given the task, they get motivated, and therefore an organization should have a system of recognizing that. So it may not be necessarily the money, but they just get that self satisfaction. Also, motivation, compensation also reduces turnover. So if you look at I know we didn't look at turnover in detail because I saw it's missing completely in the module. But the notes that I've given, including the slides, there's a topic on turnover. It's a very important component. So if you look at studies that have been done by so many researchers, one of the reasons for high turnover, it is poor compensation. So low salaries, unfair wages, disparities in terms of pay, and so on and so forth. So compensation, if it is not properly designed, particularly the salary structure, the allowances, if they're not properly designed, that could trigger actually high compensation. And that's why it is important that you come up with a compensation that is fair, but not only being fair in terms of how it is written in the policy documents, but also should be seen by the employees to be fair. So you cannot have a situation where there are huge disparities in terms of compensation. The CEO, they are getting 300,000, the manager, the directors are getting 200,000, the officers are getting 10,000 or 20,000. The people at the lowest are getting 4,000. So even if the 4,000 could be above the market average, but within that organization, it means that there's no equity. So a proper compensation system or structure should ensure that it achieves two objectives. One is what we call internal equity. So within the same organization, there should be equity, there should be fairness, but also you need to have equity in terms of how your compensation fares against other organizations, and that's what we call external equity. How does organization compare in terms of compensation with other organizations? Are you competitive, or you are paying below the market average? Otherwise, if you're paying below the market average, you'll be losing people. And that's what I'm saying. Compensation does contribute to reduce employee turnover. So your salaries should be competitive, both internally and also outside. Compensation also contributes to enhance employee engagement. So employees who feel valued and rewarded are more likely to be engaged and committed. So if you know that you work hard and ultimately they reward you, you'll be engaged, and employee engagement leads to high productivity. So from the organizational point of view, you need to be carrying out the engagement and job satisfaction survey regularly. Maybe every after 2 years, you ask the employees, serving employees, you design those questionnaires, the surveys, so that you can just get how employees actually feel about the organization in terms of salaries, in terms of how jobs are designed, in terms of other conditions of service, and they'll be able to tell you. So you need to conduct those surveys regularly, employee engagement and job satisfaction survey, and they'll tell you if pay structures are not fair. They'll tell you if the salaries are low. They'll tell you if the allowances are low, if the benefits are low. They'll tell you. So you can use that information. As you know that this era is supposed to be evidence-based in terms of decision making. So the decision should be based on evidence, and you can only have evidence if you conduct research. So once you have that information, then you can design an appropriate compensation structure that meets actually the needs of your employees. So from the organizational point of view, you should regularly conduct engagement and job satisfaction survey, and the information will come out what you need to do to make employees happy, to ensure that employees they remain engaged throughout, because studies have shown that engaged employees are more productive. Otherwise, you have a situation where employees report for work, but in terms of output, in terms of productivity, is very low. I'm sure you've heard about what we call presentism. You are variable, you are around, but in terms of work output, it is very low. Compensation also can be a tool for talent acquisition and management. So targeted recruitment. So tailored compensation can attract candidates with specific skills or experience. So sometimes it may be difficult to attract the best talent, but you can use. Yesterday and the other day, we were talking about the recruitment, that it is a strategic tool that you can use to turn around the organization. So if you look at Zanaco, which has been posting $1 billion plus in terms of profit, it's not because they have got a nice building. It is because they have got excellent talent, people who are highly talented, who can contribute effectively in terms of attainment of business goals. That's why they are able to. So it is because of the team that they have. So as an organization, if you're a bank and your profitability is less than even $1 million, yet Zanaco is hitting above 800 million kwacha or a billion, then you just know that they have got a team. So just like football teams, if you look at Manchester United, you look at Liverpool, in terms of their performance, it is because of the players that they have. And you've seen that each time they open a season, there'll be a window for buying of players. And those teams with a lot of money, those teams which have capacity to buy the best players, you find that they will assemble a very powerful team. And you see actually teams that they change in terms of performance. They can even win the Premiership League because they have got the best talent. They've got the best members of their team. So similarly, when it comes to organization, that you need to assemble a talented team. So if you want to turn around the organization, you can use compensation, just like football teams can use compensation to attract and retain the best talent. So there could be certain skills that you are lacking as an organization. So you can poach, and that's why you see people poaching. They'll come to you. How much is your salary? My salary is 200,000. Okay, we want you as a relationship manager. So if you're a relationship manager and you're the one who is managing ZRA accounts, you're the one managing NAPSA accounts, you know that those are very liquid. You're the one managing all these big corporate institutions. And they know that if they can poach you, it means that you may also influence those big institutions to move their accounts. So even as they are offering you a 300,000, because where you are right now, you're getting 200,000. So even when they're offering you 300,000, they know that is nothing, because all those big accounts will move from ZRI will move to your bank, NAPSA will move to your bank, and those are very liquid. So you actually turn around the fortune of the organization. And that's why you can use compensation to attract the best talent, but also you can use compensation to retain the best talent. So it's not just a question of attracting, but you also should be able to retain the best talent. So over the years, if your salaries remain static, people will leave. You will not keep, especially the knowledge workers. Knowledge workers are not loyal. As I've always said, they are not loyal to the organization. They are loyal to their skills. So if you're not paying very well, they will leave. You only leave, you remain with average employees, because average employees, in terms of performance, even when there are opportunities there, because they value so much job security, they will not leave. They will remain with those institutions. But highly talented individuals will leave. And that's why, from the organizational point of view, you need to come up with compensation that should be able to retain the best talent. Also, you can use compensation for performance management. So if you link your compensation to performance goals and objectives, then you realize organization. If you want to promote a performance culture, you want to encourage those who work very hard to continue working hard, then you should reward them. And that's why I was talking about those milestones. You score above 75, you score above 85, you score above 90, there should be some form of incentives so that those who work very hard will continue working hard, and ultimately they will contribute to attainment of business goals. Then for those who don't work hard, your compensation policy should have a provision for sanctions, so that those who don't work very hard should be sanctioned. Mind you, according to the law, the Employment Code Act, it provides for sanctions. So your contract can be terminated on account of underperformance. Those three grounds, you should just take note. Those have been defined as the valid reasons for termination. So in your contracts, there are only those three grounds upon which your contracts can be terminated. When you are restructuring, they can terminate your contract. And the last time we discussed what structuring, what downsizing is, redundancy. So your contract can be terminated. Your contract also can be terminated if you misconduct yourself, you engage in bribery, in corruption, theft, and so on and so. Your contract can be terminated. It is provided for. But also, your contract can be terminated for underperformance. Of course, there are several steps that should be followed, just like misconduct. So the due process should be followed. So if you're not performing, there should be sanctions also, so that you don't encourage poor performance. So you need to work very hard in this organization. So don't think that the contract cannot be terminated. It can be terminated for underperformance. But also, you, most importantly in this case, you want to encourage a performance culture. And this yesterday when I was talking about, you need to find ways of how you how you link your performance targets. Why is it going to be for the 2 consecutive years or for 3 consecutive years? And then the that could maybe constitute about 60-70% coming from performance appraisal scores, and then the others may come from soft skills, disciplinary, and so on and so forth. So basically, those are the strategic. Now, how do you determine wages in an organization? So under the ILO standards or convention, we have a convention on equal pay for equal work of equal value. Remember, we talked about in an organization, you come up with a compensation structure. That compensation should be viewed and seen as being fair and equitable. Of course, people are not asking that they should get the same salaries. There's no way. If you remember what we're talking about, when you create jobs, you create a structure, and that structure, there will also be position. What are the positions? You're going to have a position of a director, CEO. If you're going to use the C-suite, you're going to have a position of chief marketing officer, chief human resource officer, chief financial officer, and so on and so. You're going to have a position of managers. You're going to have a position of officers and the people at the lower level. So when you create those positions, how then do you determine that this position the holder should get a 10,000, the other person should get a 20,000, the other position someone should get a 10,000, other one should get 8,000? Are you going to look at faces, or you're just going to look at job titles? So if you remember, when you're looking at job analysis, that one of the application or use of job analysis information, in other words, the use of a job description, it is job evaluation. Just like we use a job description for recruitment, we use a job description for performance management, because all the targets, other than the strategic plan, when you're coming up with the targets or the work plan, when you're designing your work plan for that particular year, you'll be looking at what is provided for in your strategic plan, but also you have to look at what your job description says, so that you align the two. And for position at a certain level, lower level, there may not be specific strategic objectives in the strategic plan. So you may end up using a job description to come up with your targets and your milestone for that particular financial year. So in order to achieve equity internally, you have to use job evaluation, and the job description is very important. And that's when you're talking about, when you're asked, sometimes I'll ask questions relating to how you determine wages. So if you ask that, how do you determine wages or salary structure, it should start from job analysis, because that's the starting point. It is from job analysis, you come up with a job description, because it is in the job description that you're going to define the job characteristics, or what we call job factors. So you clearly define the job factors, because it is the job factors that you use to rate or to evaluate a job. So that is the starting point. So job evaluation, basically, it is a systematic and formal for defining the relative worth or size of jobs within an organization. It is the process through which jobs are described, analyzed, and ultimately weighted or evaluated by means of job evaluation method. The outcome, a total score in points, expresses the weight of a particular job in relation to other jobs. So you should take note that we normally talk about the relative worthiness, because what may be considered to be a very critical job in one organization may not be considered as a very critical strategic job in another organization. And that's why the emphasis is on the relative worthiness. Last time, I think I talked about an engineer in ZESCO may be considered to be so strategic compared to an engineer at UNZA, because an electrical engineer at UNZA, it is more of support. It is providing auxiliary services compared to an engineer at ZESCO. Because an engineer at ZESCO is very key, is critical when it comes to the performance of ZESCO. So basically, job evaluation tries to ensure that there's internal equity. So then what are the objectives of job evaluation? It is to establish a standard procedure for determining the relative worth of each job in an organization. So the starting point, remember, we talked about the policy, and the Monument Commission, they emphasize each organization for public institution, they should have a pay policy. And in that same pay policy, when you're talking about how to determine wages, you'll be talking about job evaluation. So job evaluation is the science that we use if you want to ensure that you have internal equity. Also, the other objective is to ensure equitable wage for a job and reasonable wage differentials between different jobs. We use it to determine the rate of pay for each job. We want to eliminate wage inequality. So it is only job evaluation, because the differences in job points will tell you the worthiness of that particular job. You use it for fixing incentives and different bonuses. It promotes fair and accurate consideration of all employees for advancement. Provide a benchmark for career planning. So those are the objective of job evaluation. In terms of the principle, you rate the job and not the job holder. So the element should be rated on the basis of what the job itself requires. So you rate the job characteristics, the job factors. So you're not rating the job holder. In other way, we are not rating, for example, somebody, if you are an accountant, you're not going to be rating an accountant who is holding that position. We'll be rating the characteristics of an accounting job. So what are the characteristics, the duties, responsibilities? That's what we'll be rating. Consequence of error, that's what we'll be rating. And all those things, that's what we'll be looking at, not the job holder. And that's why for organization, when you're creating a structure, once you have an organization, sometimes we engage consultants. I'm sure in your organization you've seen that each time they're doing restructuring, they may ask a consultant to come and do the restructuring. Why? Also, you want to divorce yourself from the process. If you use internal people to do the restructuring, certain positions that are supposed to be de-established, to be abolished from the structure, they may not abolish them. They may not recommend that they are abolished. Why? Because they'll be looking at the job holders instead of looking at the contribution and relevance of that particular position. And that's why it's important that sometimes we bring outsiders who have nothing to do with the work relationships, the job holder, they don't even know them. So for them, they'll be focusing on the job. Is it relevant? Is it contributing significant to attainment of business goals? The same thing when it comes to job evaluation. So I remember one organization, a statutory body, that we were evaluating their structure. We went on to recommend that they needed to engage a job the consultants to do job evaluation, separate from us who are doing also the review of the organizational structure, so that you ensure that there's equity, because as we had interviewed individuals within that organization for quite some time and we had become familiar with some of them. So we wanted to divorce ourselves from that process. So we recommended that we can engage another consultant to evaluate their jobs. So when you bring in a consultant, they're divorced from work relationships. So they'll just look at what is the contribution of this job, the relative worthiness. They do not have anyone in mind. So the elements selected for rating people should be easily explainable in terms of the job points and so on and so forth. Supervisors, of course, should participate in the rating of. So what you normally do in job evaluation, if you are going to use internal people, you should constitute a committee that is representative of the department. You should not have just one department dominating. You can't just have HR dominating. You'll be shocked that then almost all the HR position will be highly rated. Or you can't just have most people coming from the finance department. And that's why you should have a balanced team. So that team should be able to come up with a job evaluation manual. That job evaluation manual should clearly define what you use for evaluation. So we have these steps, or the method that we use in job evaluation. We have the ranking method. If you check what you have, you can read in detail what they are. Classification of grading, factor comparison, point system. The widely used method of job evaluation is the point system. And that's the one I'll even give examples. So the ranking method, you may just use certain job factors. For example, you may use of error, you may use problem solving and decision making to rank the jobs. So you compare them. So the job that you think that it is complex, it may be ranked number one, and the one which you think it is very simple may be ranked number last. So maybe if you've got 50 different types of jobs and you are using complexity, the most complex one will be number one, and then the least will be number last. So it could be a cleaner maybe, or an office order. Job classification or grading, you predetermine the grades, just like in secondary schools, you may have group A, group B, group C, group D. So you may have predetermined grades or classification in terms of the salary scale. So in your institution, you may have those grades. If you are an APSA, maybe it may be NPS something, NPS 01 or NPS 1, NPS 2, or NPS A, NPS, so whatever grades you may use in the institution. So you predetermine, and then you use your job characteristics like consequence of error, complexity, and you place them. So just like we place the individuals based on their performance, we place them in group A, in group B, in group C, and in group D. So similarly, when it comes to jobs, you may use job characteristics to place jobs. So if you've got 12 salary scales or grades, you place jobs based on the characteristics that you are using and the levels. Then I've got factor comparison, where you compare each job in terms of factor. Each factor, you look at the complexity, you compare it with this job. You go to problem solving, you compare it. And after that, you create a ranking order. That's the factor. Please go and read in details. You have this in your in the additional notes that I gave you. Then the point system, which is the widely used, it looks at the complete job, and you exhaustively define all the job factors. I don't know the module that I gave you, or it was the module one. There's a sample job description. Or what you can do, look at your job description, if it is properly written, your job description, and look at the job characteristic or factors. You find that it's supposed to itemize the duties, responsibilities, consequence of error, and so on and so forth. Let me just show you for example, the manual, because the manual is a starting for you do. Just a minute. So the most important thing, even as a consultant, you should have if you're going to come up with a job description. Okay, cashier, I've seen you. There's a hand.
I wanted to seek clarification on the point of job error. Is it supposed to appear in the job description? Is that what you said?
The consequence of error.
Yes.
The consequence of error. So the consequence of error, let me just define it for you. So this is the job evaluation committee. If you're going to have a job evaluation committee within the organization, so mostly you find that it is part of the human resource committee of your governing body. Remember, determining jobs is not you can't determine your own condition. So if you've got a job evaluation committee, you find that could be part of your board, a subcommittee of your human resource committee. But these you would have defined. Why are you getting all these job characteristics? Remember the job characteristics? You are getting these from what I indicated here, that the starting point in job evaluation, it is job analysis. Why job analysis? Because you need to have a job description. And it is in the job description that you clearly articulate the job characteristics, which are education, academic qualification, professional qualification, the relevant work experience in the job description, the complexity of the law, the consequence of error. So this is what we are talking about. So consequence of error, how do you define the measurement of the likely consequences that would result from errors made by the law holder negligently or out of incompetence? The measurement of the likely consequence that would result from errors made by the law holder negligently or out of incompetence. And you define the levels, because that's one of the things you do: basic, moderate, high, higher, and highest. So these are the job points. What you see: 16, 32, 48, 64, 18. So these are the job factors. So the point ranges. So once you have a job description, you would have defined the job factors or job characteristics, which are all these. Once you've defined it, the next stage you do in the job evaluation manual, it is to define the job what? The point ranges for each factor. So if it is qualification, you have to define grade 7 qualification, grade 9 qualification, grade 12 qualification, certificate, diploma, degree, master's, PhD, you define. And then you assign points. So these are the points. So you can assign points: grade 7, 5 points, grade 9, 10 points, grade 12, 15 points, certificate, up to the PhD. Maybe PhD to be 200 points. Similarly, when you come to other factors like consequence of error, you need to define the levels. So it could be basic error, moderate, high, higher, highest. So you know if someone is a janitor, a cleaner, when you define basic, if a cleaner negligently or out of incompetence, they make a mistake, what will be the consequence on the organization? For example, of little or no consequence on the organization. If they made a mistake, they are cleaning, they splash water on the walls. So the walls may just be a little bit dirty. So what will be the consequence? Probably it may be of little or no consequence. But if a director, like the one I'd given an example last time for NAPSA, because this director investment at portfolio, they're handling billions, millions of dollars. They made a mistake in terms of project appraisal that we're investing 300 million in Mamba Corals, and they made a mistake. Are you saying it will be of little or no consequence on the operation? NAPSA may sink. Or could it be B, error will result in minor disruption? Is it true to result in minor, or error will result in operational losses and inefficiency? Error will result in irreparable damage to the image and integrity. Error would result in major disruption. So you find that that particular job may score 80 because NAPSA may actually go down. Or if it's ZRI, they may lose so much revenue, it may even affect our implementation of the budget. So you find that a cleaner may score 16 points. The position of director, if it's NAPSA, investment and portfolio, on these job factors may score 8. So already it tells you that there is already a gap. So all these should be in the job description. You can define them. You need to define them in the job description. So when you are coming up with a job description, the factors, you need to define them. However, what I've seen over the years in terms of the consequence of error, sometimes it may not just be defined. You make this judgment based on the duties and responsibilities. When you just look at the duties of a cleaner, it is to sweep, it is to mop, it is to remove cobwebs, to dust, clean the windows. So by just looking at those duties, you can tell if someone negligently or made a mistake in terms of performing of their duties, will they impact the organization? So sometimes it may not be necessary to put the consequence. However, in your job evaluation manual, you need to define. Remember, when you come up with a job evaluation manual, based on your job, you need to define the consequence of error. And then you define also the levels. So these are the levels. And also you assign the points, then the points to each of the level. Just like you're assigning points to grade 7 certificate, you're assigning points to grade 9. Also, for these others, consequence of error, complexity, you also assign points. And those points, they are not fixed. So what this organization, what is important is consistent. What we may, like for example, here, basic, we may say 16. Another organization, when they're coming up with a job evaluation manual, they may say basic, it is 10. The highest may not be 8. The highest may be 50. So once you have those, it means when you're applying, they are applied consistently. So these point ranges are defined by the job evaluation committee, or if you have a consultant who could have developed your manual, they could have also defined them, just like the way we define that your pass mark is 40, your pass mark is 50, and A is this. And each institution, learning institution, will define that, and they will use that standard across. So to answer your question, I don't know, I ended up saying a lot of things, but to answer your question, you may not necessarily define in the job description. However, in your job evaluation manual, you need to define consequence of error, because it will give you an indication, just like the way it's defined here. So I hope that answers your question, Kashia. what was I talking about now? Okay, yeah. So when you come to job, the points, if you're going to use the point system, this is the process that you use. You come up with a scheme. If you're getting a consultant, you need to clearly define in the bidding document what you want them to come and do. So in the proposal, they need to clearly demonstrate what they'll come and do. And then you as an organization, the HR should be at hand to help. So they need to come up with a job evaluation manual, which should be based on the job description. So job description should be properly written. They should be, if they are not properly written, what the job evaluation committee will do, it is to facilitate that you undertake a job analysis so that you can have a job description that will capture all the job characteristics, or what we call the job the job factors. So those, they should be clearly stated. And of course, you need to clearly define the job, the factors. So what are the factors? So the factors, these are the factors. So these factors may not be the same depending on the institution or the consultant that you could have hired. However, as a sample, you may have these factors. On education, you define grade 9, you see, education or better, grade 9, full secondary, grade 12, acceptable. You may also have professional one. What is the professional? You define also certificate, diploma, masters and above. You define. The Zambia Qualifications Authority has defined for us what they mean by grade G7, what they mean by grade G9. Work experience, you define it. The minimum post-qualifying relevant experience required for the holder to perform effectively. The experience will include on-the-job training and any previous relevant experience in related roles or institution. So all these, they contribute to the worthiness. Up to 6 months, you've seen. What are the job points? Up to 6 months, it is 22 points. Up to 2 years, it is also defined. You define, it is 44. Then 132 in terms of the highest marks, you check, it is 8 years. So you need to define. Sorry, just a minute. Just give me about 2 minutes.
Hello?
Okay, so sorry, that's some disturbance. That's the problem of doing it at home. Okay, so I was talking about the job factors which are supposed to be extracted from your job description. Complexity factor measures the nature of analysis, judgment, initiative, innovation, and so on and so on. So for each one of them, you also determine the point what. So this is the document that you use to score or to evaluate a job. So you get a job description and you start evaluating. You're not evaluating job holder. So you get a position of accountant and then you subject that. So that position of an accountant, you go and check what did you say about the qualification. So you go and look at, sometimes you may not divide them into academic and professional, it may just be qualification, and so you go for the highest. So if you say bachelor's degree in accounting and finance, and you check under degree, what did you say under degree? For example, here, degree qualification. So you check the points. So if in your job description you said degree, these are the points you score for that position. So that position will score 120 just on qualification. Then you go to the next one, relevant work experience. So if you say relevant work experience should be 3 years in your job description, so it means you come to this one, 3 years. What is the 3 years? The 3 years, it's 66 points. Then you go to the next one. When you go to the complexity, looking at the position of an accountant, once you look at the duties and responsibility, they'll tell you how complex they are. So you may find that it may be, if it's an accountant, and maybe above that accountant, you have got the management accountant, you have the chief accountant, this financial reporting, chief accountant, management accounting. Then you may have the CFO, chief financial officer. So you find that this position may be level C. So level C may be routine work, requirement, more frequent, blah, blah. So that job will score 50, it will score 57. Now, once you've done the scoring, what you have, are you able to see an Excel sheet on the board, on the lot? Are you able to see the Excel sheet? Sorry? Okay. Yeah, so once you've scored all those things I was talking about, what you are seeing, F1, F2, F3, up to F12, all these are job factors. Which job factors? These, the ones we're talking about, complexity, these are the job factors. So that's what you see as F1 up to 12. Depending on job evaluation manual, you may have even just 10. When you add the job points, remember there was the 120, there was 60, there was what? So you find that for the CEO, you find that it will score very high in most of the factors. It may score very low. So this factor 12 could be maybe hazards. Is the CEO, if it's in the mining sector, the CEO may not be going underground. So you find that the CEO position will score very low on factor 12, which may be environmental hazard. Does the CEO go underground or it is the miners? So, but the miners may score very high on hazards because the risk is high, but they may have scored very low on others like qualification and so on and so forth. As you can see here, the CA, so here it was maybe masters, just a degree, masters, and so on and so forth. Then when you look at the job points, when you add, the CEO has 570, the deputy director has 517, director operations 517, director HR 514, director finance, director facilities, and so on and so on, until you go to the last one. The last one, you've got office assistant. You've seen from 570 to the lowest, which is 87, which is office assistant. So when you have got this ranking, what it tells you in essence, you have not assigned any salary here or any figure or amount. So this is what job evaluation does. It gives you a job points ranking order. So when you just look at the total job points, it tells you which job is more valuable in that organization by just looking at the job points. So from this list, you'll be saying the most critical and important job in this organization in terms of meeting organizational goals, it is the CEO position because it has 570. The least in terms of contribution to achieving organizational goals, it is the office assistant. And then followed by the reprographics, assistant procurement officer, and so on and so forth. So what it means is that within the organization, you would have achieved what we call internal equity because job evaluation helps you to do that. It helps you to determine the relativities, the gaps, which jobs contributes more to achieving business goals than the other one. So you have this list of job points. What it means that when now it comes to determining the salary, that there is no way a job with, for example, 514 job points should get more money than a job with 570. There's no way because it already tells you that this job is more important. This same also list tells you that when you start now looking at the organogram in terms of the levels, the hierarchy should actually be based on it. So you would have first done maybe the organogram. Oh, we're going to have we're going to have a director, we're going to have deputy director, we're going to have the directors, managers, and so on and so forth. When you do job evaluation, you discover that those positions where you thought they were at director level, they will actually drop. So you find that the manager procurement, initially, maybe it was, you had put it as one of the director position. But when you do job evaluation, the job points, they'll drop. When they drop, it means that it can no longer be a director position level. So you drop it. Even the title should change. Because when you say director, you should know that this position, it is at this level. When you say manager, it should be at this level. Now, what you do, because all these positions, they have job points. Others may have similar job points like 155, 155, but others, the difference is just 1, the difference is 2, the difference is 3, the difference is 4, the difference is 5. Now, from job evaluation point of view, if the differences are minimal, you should first define the point differences. For example, you may say, if the differences in terms of job points between and among jobs, if the difference is 5 job points, the difference is 10, maximum the difference is 10, it means those jobs are of equal value. They are the same. In terms of contributing to meeting organizational goals, they are the same. If the difference is above 10, it means they are not of the same value. So the next thing that you do after you come up with this job evaluation list, the job points, you cluster the jobs. Because in your job evaluation manual and your pay policy, you would have defined if the differences are 10 and below, it means that these jobs, they are of equal value. So you cluster them. So for example, 570, the difference between 570 and 517, it is huge. It is not 10 points. The difference between 517 and 517 here, it is negligible. But also you can see the difference between these other jobs. For example, you would have said the difference maybe if it's 10 or 12. You end up now clustering, for example, the director operations, director human resource, director marketing, director facility up to director corporate services, you find that the differences are minimal. So what you do, you cluster them, you put them in the same category. So the CEO position may be alone, and that's why in an organization you find that the position of a CEO may be NPA 01, and then the director positions may be NPA 02. Why? Because when you looked at the differences between the directors in terms of job points, they were negligible. They were within the 10 point difference or 10 point difference, which you would have defined that if that is a difference, then it means they are of same value. So you cluster them. So you find that all these directors, they will be in NPA 02. They will be in NPA 02. So it means if they are in the same grade, when you start determining how much the director should get, they should get the same amount of money. Why? Because they're in the same grade. This is why you find that you are a marketing officer, you are a human resource officer, you are ICT officer, you are getting the same salary. Why are you getting the same salary? When we did the grading, when we looked at the job points, they had almost the same job points. In essence, it means they are of same value. They are contributing almost the same when it comes to achieving organizational goals. They are contributing almost the same. So if they are contributing almost the same, then it follows that even the salary should be the same. So that principle under ILO that equal pay for equal work of equal value. So you should pay people the same amount if the work that they are doing is of equal value. That's what this principle actually. So all these job points, you are not going to create a salary structure for each one of the position because you'd have defined the point differences between and among jobs. So if they are falling within, you cluster them together, you put them together, and that's how you create job grades. So you can create job. I don't think I have what I'd created as. Okay. I don't think I did that. I don't think I did that. So, in essence, that's how you come up with the job what you cluster the jobs. Do you have questions? Any questions? So you should know. So, for example, if you do not go through this process in your organization, the job structure that you may have, there may be huge discrepancies because this is the science that you use to basically ensure that there's the equity. We're not saying people should get the same money, but there should be equity. If you didn't do this process, if they are not using this process, basically what they could be doing, it is just going to the market. So they're just benchmarking. That's what they could be doing. So once you have the grades, you have not yet determined the salaries. The next step now, it is to go outside because you would have achieved equity internally, but you have not yet assigned salaries in terms of 10,000, in terms of 20,000. So you don't know how much you want to cost or to pay job holders for those positions. How much are you going to pay the CEO? How much are you going to pay the directors? How much are you going to pay the managers and specific position? You're not going to use guesswork. So the next stage is to go out and undertake a salary and benefit survey. So you need to undertake salary survey. It's like you're growing tomatoes. You've grown all these tomatoes. Sorry, what did you say? If you hire a consultant and Can you just speak to that? I didn't. You sent something in your chat. So I don't know who asked that question. So
It's called.
okay.
Maybe she's not able to talk. I can read it out.
Okay.
So she's saying, what if you hire a consultant and dispute his findings, or there's no money to adjust according to findings? Can you discard the findings?
Okay. So a consultant is the you are the one who are giving them the terms of reference. So once you've given them the terms of reference, they'll come and make a presentation on their findings, and it is up to ultimately, it is up to the organization through the board, because the board is the one which determines remuneration ultimately. So they'll make a determination and a decision. So the other factors that you consider, and so that's why I was going, that after you have the job evaluation points, you have developed also the grading structure. The next thing you do now is to go out and find out what other organizations are paying. Because one thing that you don't want to do is to overpay, because you don't know what the market value is for certain position, but also you don't want to use guesswork. You can end up overpaying, or you can end up underpaying. Overpaying, it means that is a cost to the organization. Underpaying also, it is a cost because you end up having an exodus of staff, people leaving because of lower salaries and poor conditions of service. So what you do now is to go out and conduct a salary and benefits survey with the comparator organization. So you identified those comparator organizations. Of course, it's difficult to get the data on remuneration, because sometimes you don't know what those institutions will use. Of course, just like any other research, those organizations will be assured of confidentiality, but sometimes you cannot guarantee that, especially with social media. The next thing you see, it is ZESCO salaries for senior executives. You can imagine you are finding 450,000, 700, there will be an outrage. So sometimes organization may not want to participate. So even after you have identified, I'll give an example. At one point we were conducting this survey, we identified the 15 comparator organizations to participate in the survey. Out of the 15, 8 agreed to participate. But when we finally now went to those organizations to conduct those surveys, only 4 finally agreed. So you can imagine it's quite difficult to extract this information, even when you assure them of confidentiality. So when you go out now, you write to this organization, they accept to participate. As you are sending them, you are asking them to participate, you should do also send the job description, because certain jobs may not be the same the way you name them. In this organization, the CEO position may be called the managing director or director general. In another organization, to be the CEO position. In this organization, we may call a head human resource. In another organization, we may call it director HR or chief. So you need to attach a job description as you go out to ask. So for CEO position, you'll find out if it's in the banks, you first maybe ask generally, maybe 3-4 banks, how much are you paying your CEO? They'll tell you, our CEO, it is 200,000. What about other allowances? They'll tell you, other allowances, the 100% housing allowance, personal to hold a car, which someone can buy at book value at the end of the contract. They will indicate all sorts of 400 liters of fuel, medical insurance. They will indicate all those conditions of service. Another bank will talk about 250,000 and the other conditions of service. And once you have that information for the CEO, you will find that the range maybe is from 150 or 50,000 to 350,000. So once you have that information, then you have an idea how much CEOs actually are being paid out there. Unlike just sitting and say, oh, our CEO, we shall pay our CEO 45,000. You may advertise, you may not get the best talent. Once you offer, the people may not accept the offer because you are paying way below the market average. So from the organizational point of view, once you have that data, you now need to make a decision. And there are a number of decisions that you need to take into account. And you'd have repeated that for directors, for all these other positions. So you see how much they are paying the market. So once you have that decision, you can then look at also the other factor. What are the other factors that you may? So coming to, is it, I've forgotten, class rep, the one who had asked that question. So, sorry, Kombe. So you may now come to Kombe's what? Question. Organizations' ability to pay. So just like the government, they may want to pay civil servant degree orders. Maybe they may want to pay them 30,000. The diploma orders, they may want to pay them 20,000. But ultimately, to still come back to organizations' ability to pay. So even after you have conducted those surveys, you still need to ask yourself, do you have the capacity to pay? And that's why for the organization, you look at the median. What is the median? If it's a CEO, you find that the median may be 210,000. So it means you're not going to be a market leader. It means you will not be able to attract best talent in the market. So you only maybe pay 210,000. You may be the median, or you may be the laggards. You may be at the bottom. So there are a number of factors that now will influence how much ultimately you say for this position, this is how much you're going to pay. But at least you would have had the data. You would have collected the data from the comparators. Yes, Isaac, you have a question?
Yes, good morning. Maybe I might have missed the point. Just wanted to get clarity on the grading factors. Those points, are they standardized figures, or as an institution, you need to come up with your own figures, sort of the total points for you to do the grading?
So you mean the job points? The job points that I was talking about, those. So the job points, yes. Basically, you remember I was talking about this manual. Eh? So it is in the manual that you, if you're going to do job evaluation, like in our institution, we used to have a job evaluation committee. So the one we had, of course, the first time that we were evaluating all the positions, we engaged the consultant because there are so many of them. But the subsequent position that we were creating, we were doing it internally. But how did we ensure that there's no bias? We came up with a job evaluation committee, and that committee was a subcommittee of the Human Resource Committee of the board. So what we did to avoid bias, because if you pack that committee, if the members of that committee, most of them, if they are internal people, then you expect that there will be bias. So what we did, the majority of the members were co-opted. They were from outside. These were non-executive directors that we co-opted at the subcommittee level. So we got a lot of them to dilute the influence of the executive directors or internal people. So most of them came from outside. But also within that committee, we had the non-executive directors of the HR committee of the board who were actually sitting and chairing, so that you have no influence of the internal people. So if you are doing it within, it means the job evaluation manual will clearly define the point ranges. What are the point ranges? It is these. If you check the factors, academic, you define the academic qualification, you determine the qualification. What are the qualifications? I was talking about diploma, certificate, up to masters and above, and the corresponding points they are above. So when you are scoring a job, when you're evaluating a job, you look at the job description. So the job description on qualification, if in your job description you indicated a master's degree, it means that job will score, because master's it is and above, it is 144. So that's what it will score, that job, 144. Then you go to another factor, which is work experience. So work experience, if you say for that job, it is more than 8 years. When you check above 8 years, if in the job description say for a job holder to perform effectively, they need to have 8 years. Then you need to go and check the corresponding what? Because you're saying 8 years and above, it will be 132. So you add and you repeat that for each and every factor, complexity. So all these factors are the factors that you determined when you are doing job analysis, and they are in the job description. And that's why you need to do a proper analysis of jobs, so that you are able to define all the job factors in the job description. So those points are coming from this job evaluation manual, and you'd have defined the manual. The point ranges in the manual. So that's where they are coming from. But after you come up with job factors, you now need to cluster the jobs, because you cannot have a salary scale. I'm sure in your organization, you don't have so many salary scales. Probably you may have 10. If it's a very big organization with a lot of jobs, you may have 10 jobs scales. You may have 15 job scale, like ZRI, it's a very big organization, or NAPS is a very big one. They may have even 15. But for small organization, you find that you only have 8 or 10. For example, if it's NPA 01, NPA 02, NPA 03. So you cluster them so that you don't have so many salary scales. After you've clustered them, that's when now you go out and find out how the market is paying. And once you've got that data from the market, you have now all the information. Are you going to pay above the market average? Because you've got the data for CEO position, for the directors up to the lowest. Do you have the money? And that's why the issue of ability to pay comes in. The demand and supply of labor and this availability will also influence. You may want to pay a position of ICT developer 10,000, but you find that on the labor market is in short supply, and those experts are very few. So you'll be constrained now. So you end up paying very high. You have to look at productivity. Are you producing enough? And so on and so forth. So you find that you need to take that into account. The cost of living, that will influence the trade union bargaining power, management attitude. So management attitude, if you want to be an employer of choice, then it means that you'll be paying, because some organization may make so much money, but the attitude of management, if it is bad, regardless of the money that they are generating, especially towards compensation, they may still pay below the market average, or they may pay above the market average. So management philosophy, and that one of the philosophies could be, do you want to be an employer of choice? If you want to be an employer of choice, then you need to pay above the market average. Psychological and the social factors may also come in. The legislative consideration, what are the minimum wages and condition of service, all those may affect ultimately what you consider to be the salaries, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we'll end here. I know the next thing we need to look at the grading structure. Then we'll wind up. But for now, we can ask questions before we wind up. Any questions on what we have? Yes, Bremen?
So I wanted to find out if this job evaluation manual was just your sample. It's among those documents that you shared, or if you're going to share that template.
So this is so what I was showing you, for example, that's what we have used in the past in our consultants. But also I did want to share with what I used to, when I used to practice, what we're using, because the institution wouldn't, yeah. But that the one I showed you, that's the one we've used most of the time for consultants. So at your level in this course, and it's also a majoring in HR, at your level, all that you need is appreciation. So you should know at your level how salaries are determined. That people should not look at your face, how you talk, or whether you smile, or how you walk. They should use a science to determine salaries and conditions of service. That way you ensure that there is equity. So what is critical at this level for you, it is just appreciation and knowing the process and how it is done. Because you may find yourself in those job evaluation committees, you may be the managing director, you could be the managing director, so you should know the processes. So I didn't bother to give you, because if it was an HR class, then we go beyond that. Like for those who are doing e-campus, you have got an MBA in HR. So those you can bother to go beyond what is. So if you check even your module, they are summarized, but deliberately I'm giving you, because it's not just about passing the exam, it's about appreciation, so that whether the exam was asked in whatever way, you have sufficient knowledge. Yeah, not just for the exam.
Okay.
So that's the one we use for. Sometimes we used it. So it would differ depending on the job factors that you would have identified as an institution. And remember, it is coming from the job analysis process. Okay, do we have any question before we wind up? Okay, so we end here. I've seen there is a what, but I'm going into some meeting at some point, so it may not be possible to meet. But as I said, next week it may be difficult, because those first 2 days I'll be out and I'll be invigilating exams, so it may not be possible. However, before you write your final exam, would have exhausted, would have covered everything in the module. So we'll still have classes, but of course at your convenience. Usually, if it's a makeup, it's either early morning, maybe on weekends, or weekends in the evening. So we'll discuss. The class rep will keep on updating you. For now, it is bye bye. Enjoy the day.